The boarding announcement had just finished echoing through Terminal C when Maya Richardson felt the hand on her shoulder. Not aggressive, not gentle either, just firm enough to stop her mid-step, her rolling carry-on jerking to a halt beside her. She turned slowly, her expression carefully neutral, and found herself looking at a TSA supervisor's badge before she met his eyes. "Ma'am, I need you to step aside for a moment." His voice carried just enough volume that heads began to turn. The gate agent glanced up from her screen. A businessman in a charcoal suit paused his phone conversation. A family with 3 children shifted their position to get a better view. Maya felt the weight of their attention settle on her shoulders like a physical thing, heavy and familiar. She didn't ask why. She'd learned years ago that asking why only made things worse, made you look defensive, made you seem like you had something to hide. Instead, she simply nodded and moved to the side, positioning her carry-on parallel to her body, her leather messenger bag still crossed over her chest. Her boarding pass and ID were already in her hand. She'd been holding them since she left the coffee shop 10 minutes ago, anticipating this exact moment even though she'd hoped it wouldn't come. The supervisor, whose name tag read Morrison, motioned to a second TSA agent who'd appeared from somewhere behind the gate desk. This one was younger, maybe mid-20s, with the kind of eager expression that suggested he was still proving himself. He took up position on Maya's other side, not touching her, but close enough that anyone watching would understand she was contained. Flanked, prevented from leaving even if the word detained was never spoken aloud. "We're going to need to verify some information," Morrison said, reaching for the documents in her hand. Maya released them without resistance, watching as he studied her driver's license with an intensity that seemed designed to find fault. Behind him, the gate agent had stopped boarding completely. The line of passengers waiting to scan their passes had grown still, all of them watching now, their curiosity mixed with something else. Relief, maybe. Relief that it wasn't them. Relief that the system was working, catching whoever needed to be caught, even if they didn't know yet what she'd supposedly done. Maya kept her breathing steady, in through her nose, out through her mouth, a technique she'd practiced so many times it had become automatic. Her hands stayed visible at her sides, relaxed but not too relaxed, present but not threatening. She'd dressed carefully that morning in a tailored navy blazer and cream blouse, her hair pulled back in a low bun, small gold earrings that her mother had given her for her 30th birthday. Professional, respectable, unthreatening. All the things that were supposed to matter, but somehow never quite did when it counted. "This your current address?" Morrison asked, tapping the license with his thumb. "Yes." "You traveling alone?" "Yes." "Business or pleasure?" "Business." Her voice remained calm, professional, giving him exactly what he asked for and nothing more. She could feel the minutes ticking away. Her flight was boarding. Zone 3 had been called while she was still in line. She was Zone 2. If they called Zone 1 and she wasn't there, if they moved to final boarding, she'd miss her connection in Dallas. And if she missed that connection, she'd miss the meeting that had taken 6 months to schedule, the meeting that could change everything for the community health initiative she'd spent 3 years building from nothing. Morrison handed her ID to the younger agent. "Run it." The words were quiet but deliberate, and Maya watched the young man hurry toward a terminal near the gate desk, typing rapidly on a keyboard that looked like it belonged to a computer from 2005. The system was slow. Everything about this process was designed to be slow, she realized. To make you wait. To make you sweat. To give you time to crack if you were going to. Around her, the atmosphere in the gate area had shifted. What had been routine boarding procedures now felt like theater, a performance where everyone knew their role except her. The businessman had moved closer, no longer pretending to be on his phone. The family had gone quiet, the children pressing against their parents' legs. An elderly woman in a purple cardigan clutched her purse tighter. Maya recognized the look on their faces. They were trying to figure out what she'd done, what crime she'd committed, what danger she posed that required 2 TSA agents to stop her in the middle of boarding a domestic flight. She wanted to tell them she was a doctor, that she ran a nonprofit, that she'd been invited to speak at a national conference about maternal health disparities in underserved communities, that she had letters of recommendation from senators and public health officials, that her work had been featured in medical journals and news outlets. But she knew how that would sound. Defensive, desperate, like she was trying too hard to prove something. So she stayed quiet and waited, her eyes forward, her expression neutral, while Morrison circled her slowly like he was looking for something he couldn't quite name. "Where are you flying to today?" he asked, even though her boarding pass was right there in his hand, even though the gate sign above them clearly displayed Dallas-Fort Worth as the destination. "Dallas. Then Charlotte." "What's in Charlotte?" "A conference." "What kind of conference?" Maya paused for half a second, calculating whether he actually wanted to know or whether this was part of the performance. "Public health," she said finally. "I'm one of the keynote speakers." Something flickered across Morrison's face. Not quite doubt, but close to it. Like he was reconsidering something, but couldn't quite bring himself to stop now that he'd started. Behind him, the younger agent was still typing, squinting at the screen, occasionally clicking the mouse with excessive force like that might make the ancient system work faster. The gate agent had picked up her phone, speaking quietly into it while glancing at Maya every few seconds. Calling someone. Getting authorization. Covering herself in case this went wrong in either direction. Final boarding call for flight 2847 to Dallas-Fort Worth. All remaining passengers please proceed to the gate immediately. The announcement crackled through the speakers, distorted and urgent. Maya felt her chest tighten. Zone 1. They'd skipped straight past Zone 2. She watched as the last few passengers hurried forward, scanning their passes, disappearing down the jetway. The businessman shot her one last look before joining them, his expression a mixture of curiosity and something darker. Morrison seemed unbothered by the announcement. He studied her boarding pass like it was a puzzle, turning it over in his hands, holding it up to the light. Maya knew what he was doing. Stalling. Giving the system time to find something. Anything. A warrant. A flag. A reason to justify what he'd already decided. The younger agent finally looked up from the computer, shaking his head slightly. Morrison's jaw tightened. Nothing. The system had come back clean. Seemed to echo through the entire terminal. Morrison still held her documents, her boarding pass now worthless, the flight she'd booked 3 months ago departing without her, while she stood flanked by 2 TSA agents in front of an audience that had grown rather than dispersed. She felt the loss like a physical thing, a tightness in her throat that she refused to let show on her face. 6 months of emails and phone calls to get that meeting. 6 months of careful relationship building with the Charlotte Hospital Network that had finally agreed to pilot her maternal health program. The conference was just the entry point, the credibility she needed to convince them she was worth the investment. And now it was gone, lifting off the runway while she stood here being treated like a suspect for reasons no one would name. Morrison finally looked up from her license, his expression unreadable. "You can collect your things from secondary screening." He gestured toward a cordoned-off area near the terminal windows, a space Maya hadn't even noticed before. 3 plastic tables. A metal detector that looked older than the computer system. 2 more TSA agents standing ready, both watching her with the kind of neutral alertness that came from years of training. "My flight just left," Maya said quietly. It wasn't a complaint, just a statement of fact, but Morrison's face hardened slightly. "That's not my concern, ma'am. I need you to proceed to secondary screening." The younger agent picked up her carry-on, wheeling it toward the screening area without waiting for her response. Maya followed, her messenger bag still crossed over her chest, her empty hands visible at her sides. Behind her, she heard the gate agent on the phone again, probably explaining the delay to operations, covering the decision to hold the door closed while a passenger was still being processed. The remaining witnesses began to drift away now that the main event was over, returning to their own gates, their own flights, their own lives. But a few stayed. The elderly woman in purple, a college-aged girl with headphones around her neck, a man in a maintenance uniform taking his break near the windows. They watched as Maya was directed to place her bag on the first table. One of the new agents, a woman with steel gray hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, began removing items from the carry-on with methodical precision. A laptop, a tablet, noise-canceling headphones, a makeup bag, a change of clothes still in dry-cleaning plastic. Everything was placed on the table in a neat line, each item held up to the light, examined from every angle, set down with deliberate care. The woman's hands moved slowly, professionally, taking time with each object like she had all day. Maya had packed carefully. No liquids over 3 ounces. No prohibited items. Nothing that could be misconstrued or misunderstood. She knew the rules better than most people because she'd learned to follow them exactly, to give no one any reason to look twice. But they were looking anyway, and the rules didn't seem to matter when the decision had already been made. Morrison stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching the search with an expression that suggested he was waiting for vindication. The younger agent hovered near Maya, not speaking, just present. She could smell his cologne, something sharp and woody that didn't quite mask the underlying scent of nervous sweat. He was uncomfortable, she realized. Not with her, but with the situation. With the fact that the computer had come back clean and they were still here, still searching, still looking for something to justify the stop. The gray-haired agent moved to Maya's messenger bag. "I'll need you to remove this and place it on the table." Maya complied, lifting the strap over her head, setting the worn leather bag down gently. It had been her father's, a gift from his first year of medical school, passed to her when she'd followed him into healthcare. The leather was soft from decades of use, the brass fittings tarnished but still strong. Inside were the things she needed for the conference. Her presentation notes, business cards, the research data she'd planned to share, letters of support from community leaders, photographs of the mothers and babies her program had helped. The agent opened the bag and began the same methodical process. Notebook, pen case, phone charger, a granola bar, her passport, even though she didn't need it for domestic travel, carried out of habit from too many international health conferences. Each item received the same careful scrutiny, the same silent judgment. Maya watched her life being inventoried by a stranger, each personal item becoming evidence of something, though evidence of what remained unclear. "What's this?" The agent held up a pill bottle, squinting at the label through the amber plastic. "Blood pressure medication," Maya said evenly. "Lisinopril, 10 milligrams. The prescription information is on the label." The agent studied it for another long moment before setting it down and continuing her search. Morrison stepped closer, watching as the agent pulled out a small zippered pouch. Inside were more medications: ibuprofen, antacids, emergency migraine pills. The tiny pharmacy Maya carried because she'd learned that being prepared meant being able to handle whatever came without drawing attention, without needing help, without giving anyone a reason to question her competence or her control. "You always travel with this much medication?" Morrison asked. Maya met his eyes directly. "I have a medical condition. The prescriptions are legal and properly labeled. Is there a problem?" The question hung in the air between them. The terminal had grown quieter around them. That mid-morning lull when one wave of flights has departed and the next hasn't started boarding yet. The witnesses who'd remained were still watching, pretending not to watch, their phones out now, possibly recording, possibly just scrolling, impossible to tell. Maya wondered if she'd end up on social media tonight. Another video of another black woman being detained in an airport for no clear reason. Another hashtag. Another moment of outrage that would fade by tomorrow when the next video appeared. The gray-haired agent finished with the messenger bag and moved back to the carry-on, unzipping interior pockets, running her hands along the lining, feeling for hidden compartments that didn't exist. She pulled out the dry-cleaned clothes, removing them from the plastic, shaking them out, checking the pockets of Maya's spare blazer. Professional, thorough, taking her time in a way that felt less about security and more about something else. Power, maybe. Control. The ability to make someone wait while you decided their fate. Morrison's radio crackled. He stepped away, turning his back to speak quietly into it. Maya couldn't hear the words, but she could see his shoulders tense, then relax slightly. When he turned back, his expression had shifted. Not softer, exactly, but different. Uncertain in a way he hadn't been before. "We're going to need to verify your travel documents," he said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier authority. Behind him, the younger agent shifted his weight from foot to foot, glancing between Morrison and Maya like he was watching a play whose ending he couldn't predict. "You have my license and boarding pass," Maya said. "What else do you need?" Morrison didn't answer directly. Instead, he pulled out his own phone, stepping away again, scrolling through something, his thumb moving rapidly across the screen. The gray-haired agent had finished repacking Maya's carry-on, but she didn't return it. Instead, she stood with her hands clasped in front of her, waiting for direction, her face revealing nothing. Maya checked her watch. 45 minutes since Morrison had first stopped her. 45 minutes of her life spent standing in an airport terminal being searched and questioned while her flight departed and her carefully laid plans disintegrated. She thought about the conference organizers in Charlotte, probably wondering where she was. The hospital administrators expecting to meet her tomorrow morning. The mothers in her program who were counting on this expansion to bring better care to their communities. All of it hanging in the balance while two TSA agents tried to find something that didn't exist. Morrison returned, his phone still in his hand, his expression now definitely uncertain. He looked at Maya differently now, like he was seeing her for the first time, really seeing her, and what he saw didn't match what he'd expected to find. Dr. Richardson, he said, and the use of her title felt like an admission of something. There's been a development. Maya waited. She'd gotten good at waiting over the years, at standing still while other people decided things about her life, about her credentials, about whether she belonged in spaces she'd earned the right to occupy. But this waiting felt different. Morrison's use of her title, the uncertainty in his voice, the way he kept glancing at his phone like it contained information he wasn't quite sure how to process. Something had shifted, though she couldn't yet tell in which direction. There's been a situation, Morrison said finally, and Maya noticed the younger agent's eyes widen slightly, like this wasn't the script he'd been expecting either. We received information about a passenger matching your description. A Dr. Richardson traveling through this terminal today. Maya's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. Matching her description. The phrase hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them would speak aloud. She wondered how many other Dr. Richardsons had passed through this terminal today. How many other black women in business attire carrying medical credentials had boarded flights without being stopped. Morrison's radio crackled again, a burst of static followed by a voice Maya couldn't quite make out. He listened, then spoke into it quietly, turning away from her again. The gray-haired agent still stood beside the table with Maya's belongings spread across it, but her posture had changed. Less rigid, more uncertain. She caught Morrison's eye, and he gave a slight shake of his head, a gesture so small Maya almost missed it. The college girl who'd been watching pulled out her phone, angling it toward them. Maya saw the movement in her peripheral vision but didn't react. Let her record. Let there be evidence of whatever this was, whatever it was becoming. The maintenance worker had been joined by another employee, both of them leaning against the window now, arms crossed, watching with the detached interest of people who'd seen this play out before and knew how it usually ended. Dr. Richardson, can you tell me the nature of your medical practice? Morrison's voice had lost its edge, replaced by something that sounded almost careful, almost respectful. The change was subtle but unmistakable, and Maya felt a flicker of something in her chest. Not hope exactly. Hope was dangerous, but awareness that the story she'd been cast in might be shifting in ways she hadn't anticipated. I run a nonprofit, she said, her voice steady. Maternal and infant health services for underserved communities. I'm also a consultant with several hospital systems working on equity initiatives. Morrison nodded slowly, like this confirmed something. He looked at his phone again, scrolling, reading something that made his jaw tighten. The younger agent shifted closer, trying to see the screen, but Morrison angled it away. Whatever information he had, he wasn't ready to share it yet. Not with his colleague. Not with Maya. Not with the small audience that had gathered to witness her public questioning. And you were traveling to Charlotte for a conference? Morrison asked, though he already knew the answer. He was stalling now, buying time while he figured out what to do with whatever information had just landed in his lap. Yes, I'm a keynote speaker. I was. Maya let that hang there, the past tense doing the work her voice wouldn't. The flight was gone. The conference would start without her. Whatever damage had been done was already done, regardless of what happened in the next 5 minutes. Morrison's phone buzzed. He looked at it, his expression changing again, something hardening in his features even as his shoulders slumped slightly. He walked a few steps away, making a call this time instead of waiting for one. Maya watched him speak in low tones, one hand pressed to his ear to block out the terminal noise. 60 seconds. 90. 2 minutes. When he returned, his face had gone carefully blank, the kind of blank that came from years of training in how to deliver news no one wanted to hear. Dr. Richardson, I need to inform you that we received a call approximately 1 hour ago. He paused, choosing his words with visible care. A call from someone claiming to have information about a potential security threat. The caller provided a description and said the individual in question would be traveling through this terminal on a flight to Charlotte. Maya's stomach dropped. A call. An anonymous tip, probably. The oldest trick in the book, and somehow still effective. Still enough to get someone stopped, searched, detained while their life fell apart around them. She kept her face neutral, but inside, something cold and familiar settled in her chest. The description, Maya said quietly. What was it? Morrison hesitated. Black female, mid-30s, business attire, carrying medical supplies, traveling alone to Charlotte. Medical supplies. Maya felt something crack inside her, but she didn't let it show. Her prescription medications. The blood pressure pills she needed to manage a condition she'd inherited from her father, who'd spent 40 years as a cardiologist before his own heart had given out at 62. The emergency migraine medication she carried because conference travel and stress were inevitable parts of doing the work she believed in. Those were her medical supplies. We have protocols, Morrison continued. When we receive information about a potential threat, we're required to investigate. He paused, and for the first time since this started, he looked directly at her with something approaching honesty. Our investigation found nothing, Dr. Richardson. No threat. No prohibited items. Nothing that warranted the stop beyond the initial call. The admission settled between them like dust after an explosion. Maya felt the weight of it in her chest, in her throat, in the space behind her eyes where exhaustion and frustration had been building for an hour. They'd found nothing because there was nothing to find. She was exactly who she'd said she was. Morrison's phone lit up again. He glanced at the screen, and his entire demeanor shifted. Dr. Richardson, there's someone on the line who needs to speak with you. He held out the phone, and Maya stared at it for a moment before taking it, uncertain what new development could possibly matter now. Dr. Richardson? The voice on the other end was female, professional, slightly breathless. This is Sarah Chun. I'm the conference director in Charlotte. We've been trying to reach you for the past 20 minutes. Are you all right? Maya's throat tightened. I'm fine. I missed my flight. We know. TSA called us. Dr. Richardson, I'm so sorry this happened to you. The woman's voice carried genuine distress. When security ran your credentials, they found our conference materials, and someone finally had the sense to contact us directly. We've been on the phone with airport administration for the last 15 minutes. This should never have happened. Maya closed her eyes briefly. Someone had made calls. Multiple calls. People she'd never met were fighting for her while she stood in an airport terminal being searched like a criminal. The thought should have felt vindicating, but instead it just felt heavy. Tired. Like proof that this was what it took. Not her credentials. Not her professionalism. Not her careful compliance with every rule and procedure. But other people making calls on her behalf. We've arranged for you to be on the next flight to Dallas, Sarah continued. It leaves in 40 minutes, and you'll still make your connection to Charlotte in time for tomorrow's opening session. The airline is holding a seat for you, and TSA has been instructed to expedite your boarding. Dr. Richardson, we want you there. Your keynote is one of the most anticipated sessions of the entire conference. Maya opened her eyes and found Morrison watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Regret, maybe. Or just the exhaustion of someone who'd followed protocol and found himself on the wrong side of a situation that shouldn't have happened. She handed the phone back to him without responding to Sarah, without confirming she'd take the rebooked flight, without saying any of the things that were building in her chest. The gray-haired agent had finished repacking Maya's bags. She set them beside Maya with a gentleness that felt like its own apology. The younger agent wouldn't meet her eyes. The college girl had lowered her phone but was still watching, and Maya wondered what story she'd tell about this later. What she'd understood about what had happened here. Morrison cleared his throat. Dr. Richardson, on behalf of TSA, I want to apologize for any inconvenience. We were acting on information that turned out to be unsubstantiated. You're free to proceed to your gate. Free to proceed. As if the past hour could be erased with those 3 words. As if her missed flight and ruined schedule and the humiliation of being searched in public could be undone by an apology and a rebooked ticket. But Maya took her bags anyway, because what else was there to do? She'd learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting in the moment. That sometimes survival meant accepting the apology you were offered and saving your energy for the work that actually mattered. She turned toward the new gate. Gate C, 17 according to the departure board, her carry-on rolling behind her. But she paused after a few steps and looked back at Morrison. "The person who made that call," she said quietly. "Are you going to investigate who they were? Why they targeted me?" Morrison's face went carefully neutral again. "That's an ongoing matter, ma'am. I can't discuss the details." Maya nodded slowly. She hadn't expected a different answer, but she'd needed to ask. Needed to know if anyone would care about the why behind this. About the person who'd weaponized a phone call and a description and the assumptions people made about black women in airports. But she could see in Morrison's eyes that the case was already closed in his mind. She'd been cleared. The immediate crisis was resolved. What happened next wasn't his problem anymore. She walked toward her new gate, and with each step, she felt something shifting inside her. Not anger, exactly, though that was there too. Something quieter. A recognition that she would give her keynote tomorrow. She would talk about health disparities and systemic barriers and the ways communities were failed by institutions that should protect them. And every person in that room would hear her words, but she wondered how many would understand that she was also talking about this. About anonymous calls and assumptions, and the exhaustion of having to prove yourself worthy of basic dignity over and over again. The elderly woman in the purple cardigan was still sitting near gate C-17 when Maya arrived. She looked up as Maya approached, and their eyes met for just a moment. The woman nodded slightly, a gesture so small it could have meant nothing. But Maya understood it anyway. Witnessed. Acknowledged. "I saw what happened to you, and I'm sorry." It wasn't enough, but it was something. A small moment of human connection in a system designed to keep people apart. Maya sat down to wait for her rebooked flight, her bags beside her, her father's messenger bag pressed against her side like a talisman. 40 minutes until boarding. Enough time to send emails to the conference organizers confirming her arrival. Enough time to text her mother and tell her a carefully edited version of what had happened. Enough time to sit with the weight of this day and decide what to carry forward and what to let go. The new flight boarded without incident. Maya walked down the jetway with her carry-on, her boarding pass scanned by a gate agent who smiled professionally and wished her a pleasant flight. No second looks. No additional questions. Just the smooth, forgettable process air travel was supposed to be. She found her seat in row 12, stowed her bag in the overhead compartment, and settled into the window seat with her father's messenger bag tucked beneath the seat in front of her. The plane filled around her. Business travelers typing on laptops. A mother with a toddler. An elderly couple holding hands across the armrest. Normal people on a normal flight. None of them aware that the woman in 12A had spent the last 90 minutes being treated like a threat. Maya watched them board with a strange sense of detachment, like she was observing from a distance even though she was right there among them. The flight attendant came by with her cart, offering drinks and snacks. Maya asked for water and received it with another professional smile. The woman moved on to the next row, and Maya pressed the cold bottle against her forehead, feeling the beginnings of the migraine she'd been holding off through sheer will. She'd take the medication once they were airborne. For now, she just needed to sit still and let the day slowly release its grip on her body. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Call me when you land. Love you." Maya typed back a quick response, keeping it simple, knowing her mother would hear the full story eventually, but not wanting to rehash it right now. Not while she was still processing what had happened and what it meant. Another text came through, this one from the conference organizers. "So glad you're on your way. We have a car waiting at Charlotte. Anything you need, just ask." The kindness felt genuine, but Maya couldn't help thinking about what it had taken to get here. Not her credentials alone, not her careful preparation or her professional demeanor, but other people making phone calls. The conference director advocating for her. Airport administration getting involved. A system that had failed her being corrected only because she had connections, because people with authority had intervened on her behalf. She thought about all the travelers who didn't have that, who got stopped and searched and missed their flights and had no one to call, no conference director to vouch for them, no mechanism to make the system reverse itself. The plane pushed back from the gate. The familiar announcements about seatbelts and electronic devices. The slow taxi toward the runway. Maya looked out the window at the terminal receding behind them, at the gates and jetways and the constant flow of people moving through a space designed to process them as efficiently as possible. Somewhere in there, Morrison was probably filing his report. The gray-haired agent was searching someone else's bags. The system was continuing exactly as it always had, unchanged by what had happened to her. They lifted off, and Maya felt the pressure change in her ears, felt the ground fall away beneath them. She closed her eyes and tried to let go of the tension she'd been carrying since Morrison first put his hand on her shoulder. But it clung to her, sticky and persistent. The memory of standing there while strangers judged her. The calculation she'd done in those first seconds about how to respond, what to say, how to hold her body so she didn't appear threatening or defensive or guilty of something she hadn't done. The exhaustion of performing calm while inside, she was screaming. An hour into the flight, her seatmate, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and reading glasses, glanced over at her. Headed home or traveling for work? The question was casual, just the small talk people made on planes to pass the time. Work, Maya said. A conference. What field? Public health. Maternal and infant care. The man nodded, interested. That's important work. My daughter just had a baby. The care she received made all the difference. He pulled out his phone, showing Maya a photo of a newborn with a shock of dark hair. 3 weeks old. Healthy because of doctors and nurses who knew what they were doing. Maya smiled at the photo, feeling something loosen slightly in her chest. She's beautiful. Your daughter was lucky to have good care. She was. Not everyone does, though. I know that. The man put his phone away, his expression thoughtful. My daughter's a teacher in an underserved district. She sees families struggling to access basic health care all the time. Says it's one of the biggest challenges her students face. They talked for a few minutes about health disparities, about the gaps in the system, about the work Maya did and why it mattered. The conversation was brief, surface level in the way plane conversations always were, but it reminded Maya why she'd gotten on this plane in the first place. Why she'd packed her bags and prepared her keynote and traveled across the country despite knowing she might face exactly what she'd faced in that terminal. The work mattered. The mothers and babies in her program mattered. The research she'd compiled and the partnerships she'd built and the systems she was trying to change from the inside mattered more than one bad hour in an airport, more than Morrison's suspicion or the anonymous caller's malice. She couldn't control those things, but she could control whether she let them stop her from doing what she'd come to do. When they landed in Dallas, Maya had 30 minutes to make her connection. She moved through the airport quickly, her carry-on rolling smoothly behind her, her body remembering how to navigate crowds and terminals and the rhythm of travel. No one stopped her. No one gave her a second look. She was just another passenger rushing to catch a flight, invisible in the way she'd wanted to be invisible that morning before Morrison had made her visible for all the wrong reasons. The Charlotte flight boarded on time. Maya found her seat, stowed her bag again, and settled in for the final leg of the journey. The sun was setting outside her window, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that looked almost artificial in their beauty. She took out her presentation notes, reviewing them one more time, even though she'd practically memorized them already. The statistics about maternal mortality rates, the case studies from her pilot program, the recommendations for hospital systems and policymakers. Tomorrow morning, she would stand in front of 300 healthcare professionals and deliver this keynote. She would talk about the barriers that kept women from accessing care, about implicit bias in medical settings, about the ways systemic racism manifested in health outcomes. And somewhere in her mind, she would be thinking about Morrison and that terminal and the anonymous caller who tried to stop her from getting here. She wouldn't mention it in her speech. That wasn't the point. But it would inform every word she said, every statistic she cited, every recommendation she made. The plane touched down in Charlotte just after 9. Maya collected her bag, made her way through the airport, and found the driver holding a sign with her name on it. He loaded her luggage into the car and drove her to the hotel, making pleasant conversation about the weather and the city. She checked in, rode the elevator to her room, and finally, after nearly 12 hours of travel that should have taken 6, she was alone. She sat on the edge of the hotel bed, still wearing her blazer, her father's messenger bag beside her. The room was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic outside. Maya let herself feel it then. The anger and the exhaustion and the frustration and the sadness. Let it wash over her without fighting it, without trying to be strong or composed or professional. Just sat there and felt the weight of what had happened and what it meant and how tired she was of carrying it. Then she stood up, hung her blazer in the closet, and started preparing for tomorrow. The hotel alarm went off at 6. Maya had been awake since 5:30, lying in the dark watching the ceiling and replaying yesterday in fragments. Morrison's hand on her shoulder. The gray-haired agent methodically removing each item from her bags. The plane lifting off 2 hours later than it should have. She'd slept in pieces, waking every hour to check the time, her body still carrying the tension even though the immediate threat had passed. She showered and dressed carefully, choosing a different blazer than the one she'd worn yesterday, deep burgundy instead of navy. Small changes that felt like armor. Her presentation notes were already loaded on her laptop, backed up on a USB drive, and printed out just in case. She'd learned to prepare for every possible failure of technology or circumstance. Yesterday had just reinforced what she already knew. You couldn't control what happened to you, but you could control how ready you were when it did. The conference center was a 10-minute walk from the hotel. Maya arrived early, before the morning crowds, and found the main ballroom where she'd be speaking. It was larger than she'd expected, with seating for at least 300, a stage with professional lighting, 2 large screens flanking the podium. A technician was already there testing the microphone, and he helped her load her presentation, checking that the slides advanced properly and the embedded videos played without buffering. "You're the keynote?" he asked, and Maya nodded. "Great. You've got a good crowd registered for this session. Should be close to full capacity. 300 people. 300 healthcare professionals who'd chosen to attend her session out of dozens of options." Maya felt something flutter in her chest, anxiety mixing with purpose. She walked to the podium and looked out at the empty chairs, imagining them filled. Doctors and nurses and administrators and researchers. People who worked in systems that were broken in the same ways hers was. People who might listen. She thought about what she would say. Not just the prepared remarks about maternal mortality statistics and pilot program outcomes, but the why beneath it. Why she'd gotten into this work in the first place. Why she kept doing it despite obstacles that seemed designed to wear her down. Why yesterday, in that terminal, hadn't stopped her from standing here this morning. By 8 o'clock, people were filing in. Maya stood near the side of the stage, watching them find seats, greeting colleagues, settling in with coffee and notebooks. She recognized a few faces from previous conferences. Hospital administrators she'd spoken with. Researchers whose work overlapped with hers. And many she didn't know. People who'd come because they cared about the same problems she did, because they wanted solutions. Sarah Chun found her backstage. "Dr. Richardson, I'm so glad you made it. Are you ready?" The woman's face still carried traces of yesterday's stress, the guilt of knowing what Maya had gone through to be here. "I'm ready," Maya said, and realized she meant it. The introduction was brief. Sarah outlined Maya's credentials, her program's success rates, the recognition her work had received. Then Maya walked onto the stage, feeling the lights warm on her face, hearing the polite applause, seeing 300 faces turn toward her. She adjusted the microphone, pulled up her first slide, and took a breath. "Good morning. I want to start by telling you about a woman named Keisha." She clicked to the next slide, showing a photograph. A young black woman holding a newborn, both of them healthy, both smiling. Keisha came to our clinic when she was 6 months pregnant with her second child. She'd lost her first baby 3 days after birth due to complications that should have been caught earlier but weren't. She was terrified it would happen again. She didn't trust hospitals. She didn't trust doctors. And she had every reason not to. Maya walked them through Keisha's story. The barriers she'd faced accessing prenatal care. The assumptions healthcare providers had made about her. The ways the system had failed her the first time and almost failed her again. But this time was different because Keisha had found Maya's program, and the program had connected her with providers who listened, who saw her as a whole person, who understood that healthcare wasn't just about medical interventions, but about trust and dignity and being treated like your life mattered. Keisha's baby is 18 months old now, healthy and thriving. And Keisha is one of our program's community health advocates, helping other mothers navigate a system that wasn't built for them. Maya paused, letting that sink in. That's what we're here to talk about today. Systems that weren't built for everyone, and how we changed them. She moved through her presentation, showing data about maternal mortality disparities, about which communities were most affected and why. She talked about implicit bias in healthcare settings, about the ways assumptions shaped treatment decisions, about how Black women's pain was consistently underestimated and their concerns dismissed. She showed the results from her pilot program, the measurable improvements in outcomes when women received comprehensive, culturally competent care. An hour passed. Maya was aware of the audience's attention, the way people leaned forward during certain points, the nods of recognition when she described problems they'd witnessed in their own institutions. She saw some people taking notes. Others had tears in their eyes during the patient stories. This was why she did this. Not for the recognition or the credentials, but for moments like this when information became understanding, when statistics became human stories that demanded action. She closed with her recommendations. Specific, actionable steps that hospitals and health systems could implement. Training protocols, policy changes, community partnership models. Things that would require resources and commitment, but that had been proven to work. We know what saves lives, she said. The question is whether we have the will to do it. Whether we're willing to acknowledge that our systems are failing people and commit to changing them. The applause when she finished was sustained, genuine. People stood. Maya felt the emotion of it hit her unexpectedly, felt yesterday's exhaustion and frustration transform into something else. Not vindication exactly, just the simple recognition that she'd done what she came to do, that the work continued, that showing up mattered. During the question period, a young black doctor in the third row raised her hand. Dr. Richardson, thank you for this. I'm a resident in obstetrics, and I see these disparities every day in my hospital. But when I try to talk about them, I'm told I'm being too sensitive or making everything about race. How do you keep advocating when people don't want to hear it? Maya looked at her, seeing herself 10 years ago, seeing the exhaustion and determination in equal measure. You keep showing up, she said quietly. You document everything. You build relationships with people who do want to listen. You find allies. And you remember that every patient you fight for, every time you refuse to accept a system that's failing people, you're making a difference even when it doesn't feel like it. She paused. And you take care of yourself. This work is hard. It takes everything. Make sure you have support. The young doctor nodded, and Maya saw her write something down. Saw other people in the audience writing too. Small moments that might lead to something. Or might not. But the possibility was there, and that had to be enough.